welcome to Cyber Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, namely me, Rory Duncan.
And me, Christina Richmond. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. Hi, Rory.
Hey, Christina. How are you doing?
I actually slept well last night for the first time in I don't know how long.
Nice.
And I feel pretty gosh darn good. I shouldn't jinx it. Wait, let me touch wood.
Yeah, fine. Crisscross and all that. And you survived Halloween.
Yes, and we watched a really interesting movie last night on the back of Halloween called The Witch.
Uh-oh. Is that scary?
It
Not
was
too
more like hang on to your hat.
Suspenseful.
It's not suspenseful. It's a film by Robert Eggers. So he did The Lighthouse. He did The Northman.
Oh, yes.
And this was when Anya Taylor-Joy first made her kind of debut in this movie, The Witch. I would say it is creepy, suspenseful, not terrifying. It was really good. So we survived Halloween. Had about 30 kiddos come by.
All right.
But other than that, it's been a good week.
Fine.
And you? How are you? You survived All Saints Eve. What is it? All Hallows Eve?
Yeah.
What do you celebrate over there?
Well, I think in the last episode I talked about, guising, which is the short for disguising, you see. So your kids are in disguise and going around. That was very much on show. However, I felt a little bit old or out of it when a group of kids came along. So they were primary school age, so elementary school age for US folk. They were maybe 10 years old, no older than that. And I had them a big bowl of Haribo sweets ready for them, these little jelly, chewy things.
Yeah.
And they looked at it and then looked at me and said, "Oh, no, thank you." I'm like, "Oh, why?" And they said, "They're not vegan," and turned around and walked off. Now,
Indeed, they're not, Rory.
I have no.
You.
Well, I have. Obviously, I have no issues with that. One of my offspring is also vegan, but it's strange to see it on such a young person who's making those decisions.
It is.
And I don't know. Back in the day, we just ate anything, and then came up in hives or vomited afterwards or whatever intolerances we had, because it was free sweets, free candy. Anyway.
That's right. You didn't care back in the day.
So I felt my age there. I thought, gosh, these are the times we live in. So note to self, make sure I have vegan candy for next year, because I'll be quizzed about it.
You will be quizzed about it. Well, we've both made it to the other side, thanks to, whatever. And I'm so glad that we're here. And so we have some cool stuff coming up this week in the episode.
Yeah. What do we have, Christina?
Well, something actually near and dear to my heart, which is a weird way to introduce it, but CISO burnout. I've talked about it actually over the years quite a bit. So we're going to look at a news article on it. And our guests have talked about it. We have talked about it. I think we both suffer from it. We'll talk about it. So that's burnout.
Yep.
And then CrowdStrike, right? Tell us about that.
So CrowdStrike has released its 2025 European Threat Landscape Report. So, regional specific. And why is that important? Well, geopolitics plays an increasingly important role when we're looking at many things these days, including cybersecurity. And the report finds that Europe is a primary target for e-crime adversaries. But also there's a role that conflict-driven cyber activity has added to the mix, so that will be interesting.
Yeah, that will be interesting. And then we have a guest, as usual. This week is Andy Ash, who's affectionately known as Andy 2 over at Netacea, which is pronounced Netacea like panacea. He is the CISO over there, and Andy Still is the CEO. So Andy Still is, he's Andy number 1. So we'll chat with Andy number 2 about bot protection, threat intelligence, API security, and much, much more.
Thank you, Christina. So let's do the first news story. Would you like to start? Let's talk about extremely important and serious topic, CISO burnout.
Yep. So this was an article in Security Week, and it is a fascinating article, actually. CISO burnout epidemic, endemic, or simply inevitable. And what they highlight is that in 2019, burnout was actually defined by the WHO, the World Health Organization, as an occupational phenomenon rather than a medical condition. Interestingly, as a corollary to that, I was talking to a lot of folks, and I think I wrote something on this, about a Nominet study. Nominet is a UK DNS provider. And back in 2020, they did something no other survey had done that I had seen, which is they asked about stress levels and how CISOs take care of their stress. And they discovered that 32% said stress had repercussions on their marriage or romantic relationships and had affected their personal relationships, and turning to medication or alcohol as relief, right? As relief from stress had increased year on year from 17% in 2019 to 23% in 2020. So what's interesting, I mean, I'd love to repeat that and see where it is today, because I'm guessing it's much higher, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So how do we define burnout, Rory? What do they say is the definition of burnout?
Well, burnout is way different and more extreme than a headache. Secondly, it's not a disease, as you mentioned. It's a kind of workplace phenomenon, if you like. So it's symptoms of an unspecified disease or condition. But where does it come from? I think that's about the underlying aspects and what kind of treatment can be given to detect or prevent and kind of reduce the symptoms. The cause and effect of burnout, this article says, is like the cause and effect of PTSD, or more specifically, it says CPTSD or complex PTSD. But the two conditions are not considered to be medically related. And if you look at PTSD, and perhaps some listeners may have been affected by that if they're, have had a veteran experience or are perhaps active participants in a conflict somewhere, it is a kind of an effect that builds up over time. It's accumulated, repeated trauma. However, one step back from that, burnout is largely, but not solely, caused by long-term stress. But within that period, there can be many traumatic events. So, it kind of up and down, as it were, complete or partial compromise, etc., etc. So it's interesting to see where this is on the spectrum, if you like.
Yeah, they do bring in the spectrum, actually. They actually talk about neurodivergence and how there is a high preponderance of, divergence in cybersecurity. A lot of folks with neurodivergent diagnoses or conditions, or I don't know, I don't know what we call it. It's not really a disorder or a condition, but just a state of being.
It is.
And, we seem to attract a lot of folks who are on the spectrum. And so that's tied in. So PTSD, CPTSD, burnout, neurodivergence. There's also something that I pulled out of the news story, which I thought was really interesting. Burnout is made worse by the often quoted problem of accountability without responsibility. And this is, direct quote from the Security Week article that you've pulled for us to discuss. And so CISOs are accountable for the security posture, the preparedness, the response of the entire organization when in crisis, but they have no authority to ensure everyone throughout the organization really does what he or she is supposed to do. So they're accountable for what happens, but not responsible. And they often don't have the budget with which to make sure everything is in place that they need to have in place. So I thought that was really interesting that they pulled that out. And the other thing I found really interesting, and I'm going to go try this, honestly, because I do think I have suffered from burnout and I feel like I've been recovering. And I've been calling it PTSD, but it's really not, because it's not a trauma. It's more the burnout. And so there was something in the article about, it's kind of a meditation exercise or exercises called iRest, integrative rest, to treat different things like PTSD and burnout. It doesn't simply encourage passive relaxation, but it also provides active neurotraining in the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And it's actually used by the US military and, to a lesser extent, the UK military. So it's got some scientific validation. Anyway, look it up. It's iRest, integrative rest. I thought it was fascinating.
Okay. Let's talk about the second story of the week, and this is a new report by CrowdStrike. They've released their 2025 European Threat Landscape Report, and this is regional specific, name, obviously by the title, and it summarizes the nation-state, e-crime, and hacktivision threats that are impacting Europe to help inform, public and private sector stakeholders. Now, this is interesting because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Europe is a primary target for e-crime adversaries. And the report by CrowdStrike says that this is likely due to the relative profitability of Europe-based entities, the region's legal framework, and the political motivations of e-crime actors, which is really interesting. Something like 22% of all victims on dedicated leak sites, so DLS, are Europe-based, and DLS entries rose by 13% year on year. The other aspect that they talk about in the report was about big game hunting, or BGH, ransomware. Very much dominated the high-value industry sectors across particularly the UK, Germany, Italy, France, and Spain, and they're the largest economies in Europe. There was a huge surge in fake CAPTCHAs, with over 1,000 incidents impacting European-based customers in 2024 and 2025. We can't cover this without mentioning Scattered Spider, which of course has had a lot of high-profile success, particularly in the UK in the last year to 18 months.
I just have to pause you there, if I may, because Spider is definitely the nom du jour. We had bears for a long time.
Yeah. I know.
And now, in reading this report, it is a really good report. And I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it's a really good report.
Yeah.
And the spider names are just, throughout the whole... just doing a search on Spider, which I'm just doing now, there are 56 matches. And, there's Curly Spider. Yeah. There's Wandering Spider. So it seems to be the nom du jour.
Absolutely.
But sorry to interrupt, but I did find this report to be very good. And we still have bears, and we have buffaloes and hawks and kittens and all kinds of things.
Snakes and pangolins and armadillos.
The scattered spider thing that you were just going to mention is really vishing. It's that voice phishing, which is on the rise, right? And it's, think of, just for listeners who might not know what vishing is and how it might cause trouble. With AI now, we're seeing better and better impersonation with voice, with images, people's visage, if you will. And so calling the help desk with someone's impersonated voice and some of their details, these attackers are trying to reset a password, perhaps gain access to payroll information to modify it once they've compromised that identity. It's quite a thing, actually, and it's becoming a significant threat. They've definitely increased the use of vishing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the last thing just to touch on from the report was the geopolitical aspects, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that triggered a huge surge of targeted cyber intrusions focused on Ukrainian entities. But it kind of went further than that. So beyond conflict-specific operations, we've got Russia, Iran, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, so DPRK, China, Turkey, Kazakhstan, and India have persistently targeted European entities through cyber operations.
Interesting.
So partly... the report says this is about strategic intelligence collection, right? See what they can find. Information operations, IP theft, and then opportunistic financial gain. So some of these things are certainly tried and tested. They've been going on for many years, but it's interesting that the cyber conflict aspect crops up particularly in Europe. All the different countries, all the different interconnected relationships, the block of EU countries versus the non-EU countries versus the different relationships that these individual countries have with other nation-state actors like Russia, like China. It all comes into the mix.
Really an interesting thing. CrowdStrike does a great job with their threat report. I mean, there's so many great threat reports out there now, and I appreciate that they made a regionally specific one.
Yeah.
It's very useful for those folks fighting the good fight in Europe specifically.
So thanks CrowdStrike. Tip of the hat, round of applause to those guys again for the report. Very useful, very interesting. Let's hope they keep doing this. So this week's special guest is Andy Ash, aka Andy2, who's the CISO at Netacea. Hey again, Andy. Great to hear you again, and thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm very well and very used to being Andy number 2. Our CTO, Andy Still, is our co-founder, so he gets the title of Andy number 1.
That's great. It's great to have to be in an organization where you can call yourselves, Andy 1, Andy 2, without raising any eyebrows. So that's good to hear.
Well, and I called Andy number 1 the CEO, but I was mistaken. It's CTO.
He is CTO.
But he is, CTO, but he's one of the founders. So, all right. I'm so glad you're on with us, Andy. This is great. And thank you for taking time out of your day. Where are you based, by the way? Are you actually in London, in Europe?
No, I'm based in the UK, but not London. So I'm north. So I live just outside Manchester.
Oh, okay. I want to break into song, but I won't. So usually we start off with, something easy like, gee, what keeps you up at night, Andy? That's easy, right?
Yeah. Lots of things keep me up at night. And as a CISO, I probably should say something around third-party risk. But the problem that we've been kind of mulling around, and it is relevant to probably all listeners, is agentic AI. And in the broad sense, how do we ensure that the proliferation of agentic AI, which is happening today, is done in a secure way, and that we don't add to the kind of security sprawl that we already have in organizations? How do we make sure that the use of AI is done with integrity, without risk or with mitigated risk? So in the world that we operate in, we see an awful lot of web traffic, and essentially the challenges that agentic AI brings into the bot management space generally is that bot management used to be looking for the difference between a human user on a website and a mechanical user on a website. So what we would define as a bot, hence bot management. Because the bots were generally either something that you knew and you trusted, like Google indexing, crawlers, the thing that kept your website up and running, like an availability check or some kind of latency testing that you might do on the website. And they were all great, or they were bad and they were out to perform malicious acts upon your website. Maybe they were going to perform account takeover. Maybe they were going to do credential stuffing attack. Maybe they were going to start testing stolen credit cards against the actual website. And what agentic AI does is that it adds a new level of complexity into the equation, because we will have human users like we three people looking to go about our business on the internet. We will have all of the old synthetic traffic going to a website, but we will also have a new category of traffic, which is fundamentally agents acting on the behalf of real people. That's a fundamental change to the way that the internet works. So how we manage that and how we protect against incidents of fraud and abuse against websites is something that keeps me up at night. That was quite a long answer to a simple question, but that is what keeps me up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Christina, I know we've talked about how this has changed over the 10, now 11 months we've been doing this podcast, that back in January, Andy, when we started to ask this question about what keeps you up at night, nobody was talking about agentic AI. It literally kind of appeared from nowhere, such that by the time we got to April, May, June, July, that was the most talked about topic when we had our guests on. So What do you think is behind this sudden, rapid take-up of agentic AI technology when it comes to cybersecurity, Andy?
I think as humans, we've been conditioned for the last 20 years to swap out a bit of convenience for some data privacy risk. So you think about when you click on accept all cookies on a website, and in Europe we have to do that all the time because of GDPR. You are giving a bit of yourself away, but you're choosing to do that yourself. What agentic AI does, and it's my belief that this will be a shift in the internet that is bigger than mobile, and I'm paraphrasing from, I think, the CEO of Okta I was watching the other day, but this is a significant shift from identity, which is based on me because I am acting on my own behalf, to me basically abstracting a synthetic identity of me to an agent, which will then act very much on my behalf. That shift is quite fundamental in terms of identity. We can talk about deep fakes, and I know that's a really hot topic at the moment. On a personal level, I hope nobody is deep faking me. I suspect they aren't at the moment, but that could be very real. But yeah, in terms of the attack surface, as companies, vendors who transact on the internet for their living introduce the types of technologies that these agents will interface with. So we're talking about agent-to-agent protocol type stuff, or agent to API. As that gets introduced, we open up risk. It's that risk that I think is the thing that is kind of tempting cybersecurity into a panic kind of thing, because we don't have a run book right now to make sure that is secure.
You tied agentic AI back to a human, and I agree. Quite often, agentic AI is used on the human and has policies and guardrails in place to tell the agent what it can go off and do and create and whatnot. However, what we've also been hearing, and what terrifies the socks off of me, is the non-human identities potentially created. Now, I'm not talking about synthetic abstracted identities, which you were just chatting about, but a non-human identity, which is actually created by an agent, right? To spin up a new service or a new machine or a new identity to proliferate whatever its mission, to work on the mission it was assigned. But if there isn't proper policy or guardrail put in place, that's what worries me. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. It is. So I think, was it Salesforce that put out about 4 billion agents overnight? It was about half the human population or something like that. Now, they're going to be working within the Salesforce environment. However, at the point that we are transacting through our agents ourselves, so at the point that we do have synthetic and abstracted identities, which... if I give you a number, $101 billion of online fraud in 2024. That's the National Retail Federation's estimate of how much online fraud and things like refund abuse are costing businesses globally.
Say that number again.
$101 billion.
$101 billion with a B.
The loss to fraud online is already very large. And as you identified correctly there, Christina, one of the things that the attackers will look at doing is spinning up many, many more identities that are entirely believable, because, how do you go through know your customer checks? Well, you can check if they exist on social media. Well, if I've got an agent that spins this identity up with an address and, maybe a picture, photograph of me, maybe even some video and a relevant X account or a LinkedIn account or whatever it might be, that is becoming increasingly easy to do using agents in the first place. But it does proliferate the number of accounts that are available to fundamentally organized crime to persist attacks on vendors who, like I say, are transacting online. So that number is very big now. And again, going back to what keeps me up at night, how do we keep that number down and don't see that cost of fraud accelerate over the next 3 to 4 years?
Are you optimistic?
Yes, of course I am. I'm very...
I love it.
Yeah, we have to be optimistic. Look, AI has so many amazing uses. So generally about AI, I was on a panel recently where someone who was doing something very worthy with AI. Essentially, they were generating an LLM that helped with genetic counselling. So if you have a genetic report, you quite often need to talk to someone about it afterwards. And there just aren't that many genetic counsellors in the world. And they were looking to the LLM to actually persist that skill set across, what would be a very small number of people, but now open that out and democratise that service. And I thought that, there are so many good reasons to be optimistic about AI. In terms of the way that we look at the fraud problem and that we look at how agentic AI will interact on the internet and purchasing journeys, etc., we do have ways forward. There are things that have been none of this is set in stone. This isn't necessarily happening all the time today. There are some agent shoppers out there. OpenAI created one. Amazon have an internal agentic shopper, but you can only use it on Amazon at the moment. So it's coming, but it's not here yet, which is good because it gives us time to prepare. And I think the work done in some of the agentic protocol and standards, so A2AS, the security standard that's been pushed by a lot of the big companies, give us a fighting chance of being able to fundamentally lock this down before it's too late. And I think that there's going to be a lot of effort into going into that in the next year. OpenAI are looking at a standard of how their agents interact, to limit the scope of data access, to limit to read-only, to limit to different data sets and different actions. I think in terms of the bot management industry, we're looking, and this isn't just Netacea based, we're looking to intent and integrity of web traffic. So essentially we're looking at what the entity, because it's no longer a person or a robot, we're looking at what the entity is going to be trying to do on that website, look at that behavioral pattern and essentially ascribe intent and integrity to that, so that we can create mitigating actions, which we do today across a whole range of use cases we talked about.
Yeah, it's kind of like UEBA, but for agentic.
Exactly right. And I think, as we go through the next 12 months, the defense in depth approach to protecting AI endpoints and everyday endpoints, APIs, for example, if you're building an agent, you probably want it to talk to an API rather than go to the website. How we actually defend those in depth, I think there's a lot of change coming in that area in the next 12 months.
Indeed. I've been chatting with some folks about readiness services around AI and agentic AI. And I don't think there's a lot out there right now, assessing where you are in your journey with agents or with Gen AI. But it's coming. And I'm happy to see that we're starting to treat it as, what you mentioned at the very start of our chat, risk management, that we need to look at third-party risk. We need to look at risk in general. And certainly this just adds a whole new layer, Gen AI and agentic AI. I'm curious, Andy, can you educate us on, can agents do business logic attacks? Is that something that they can go in? Like, can the shoppers that are malicious shoppers go in and do price manipulation or, discount abuse? They can. Yeah.
That again, we're in future state here because there just isn't that much agentic web traffic at the moment, but there will.
Right.
There
will be.
At the minute, one of the things we're dealing with is LLMs. With our customers. So essentially we're looking at LLMs scraping very valuable content off media websites, if you've got a site that publishes white papers, for example, probably quite close to home to you guys, that is your intellectual property. You might not necessarily want that to be scraped. And we're looking at putting controls in, that isn't future state. We have put controls in to identify that kind of scraping and do something different with that traffic, whether it's mitigate or send to a paywall or whatever it might be. In those terms, they're not attacks. That's just the functionality of the web. But business logic attacks will be persisted by organised crime in a way that is most efficient for them, because at the end of the day, they're a business as well. So if you make your living by selling stolen credentials, and there is an agentic way to create that workflow that takes credentials off the dark web that have been in other breaches and then push those through, just ordinary websites to validate which ones work and which ones don't, and then sell those on afterwards. This is the bedrock of a lot of different types of business logic attack. You will use agentic AI to do that. And in fact, you're going to make it more efficient by doing so.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I was just thinking about it as you were talking there that unfortunately our concerns about the deepfake side of things, that's it. We've been recording you for 15 minutes and they only need 2 or 3 minutes of your voice to clone it. So I think you're hosed. But of course, so are we. Christina and I've got
I was going to say, how do you know you're talking to the real Andrew Ash?
Well,
he's not knowable anymore, is he?
Yeah, that's right. Well, but it brings a serious point, which is, as humans, as individuals, our identities are tied up with how we look, how what we sound like, and various other things. Obviously, from an identity perspective, we're often asked, certainly the UK, your mother's maiden name or your date of birth, although that's easy. Those things are kind of easy to spoof in many ways. You just look on Facebook or whatever. But I wonder if maybe we need to have more coded identities as people, which would stop, the deep fakers. I know with my kids when they were growing up, when I was introducing them to being online, we had a phrase that was a secret phrase that they could always drop into a conversation or ask if they weren't sure if I was me. And if I didn't come back with the correct response, then, end of call, or they wouldn't do it, or they would call their mum or call the police or something. And it was a kind of a way of validating who I was, that only they would know, even if I said or looked like me. I know that may sound a bit crazy, but actually maybe that's what we have to do going forward. Maybe our identities are coded in a way that it doesn't rely on the way that people would normally recognize us.
Yeah, I think that's so that extra level, and if you reverse that back, that's a know your customer piece. It's that secret word that we share together. The challenge is that as we abstract our identities, it may be that identity is pushed across multiple. Well, my prediction is that it will be pushed across multiple vendors. So let's say you're doing your weekly shopping online, and that's really tiresome thing to do. I think most people would be quite happy to abstract that off to an agent, which could go and get the best prices off, let's say, 10 supermarkets in the US. And maybe, you do get 3 deliveries, but it's the cheapest and best produce you can get based on the guardrails that you've built in. It means that secret needs to be shared across all. Where identity lives is probably the thing that we need to think about, because if it lives with the agent, the agent then has to validate you against your shopping, but also all of the other supermarkets as well, to get your offers, to get your orders, to get the ads that they want to place into that agent.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
The market will actually be with the agent, and therefore the identity will also be with the agent as well. So I think there's a lot of ways that this can play out. But what I would say, again, it's that convenience bit. We work in an industry where tiny delays in the purchase journey are frowned upon by the people who are selling the products, because they know as soon as there is that delay that the human will jump off and go and buy that somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So the more friction you put in a buyer journey, the less likely they are to buy. So it needs to be balanced back to risk versus it's the age-old conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Maybe we all need a bit more patience, but then I'm the first one to huff and puff and stamp my foot when I'm at the supermarket and the self-checkout and the scanner doesn't work, and somebody has to come over. I'm like rolling my eyes, but yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Andy, that was a great discussion, and very much value the chat, and hope you can come back on at some point. It would be good in the new year.
I would love to, with more predictions. I am actually partway through trying to write a book on this subject.
Oh,
really? And
lovely.
The problem that I have is as soon as I write anything down, it either becomes true or is debunked. There is really no future. We are being denied the future by the pace of change. So, it's a really interesting subject.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I know exactly why. I think the only way not to do that is like writing about stones or fossils or something like that.
It might be easy.
Something that's hundreds of millions of years old. Sorry, Christina.
Yeah. Maybe, let me make a suggestion that maybe you do it in a serial manner. You find somebody that would let you put out, the most current episode or, write-up that you have that's maybe one chapter. And then in the next drop in the series, you can update the last
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and since I've written this has changed.
Yeah. Or like a Substack or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to that.
Easy to write a book, that's for sure.
I know. Great. Okay. Thank you, Andy. We look forward to talking with you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
So, yeah, that was another great chat, Christina, with Andy.
It was.
Andy too.
Yeah, it was different. It was different than some of, our recent chats. Still, I mean, mostly about AI, and it's always fun when we don't talk about AI, but this was very purposeful, looking at fraud on the web and how agentic AI is going to proliferate that.
Yeah, and the whole deepfake discussion and what it means, it's sort of lurking there in the background. I know we talked about it previous week about how prevalent it was in Africa. Remember that? We saw that because of the highly regionalized nature of accents and languages. But it's not something that's going to go away. It's going to probably get a lot worse before there's better solutions for it.
And yet, Andy is an optimist. And, I loved how he pivoted and talked about how, AI is bringing so much promise. He didn't quite answer the question, which I didn't phrase properly, which is, are you optimistic about fraud? And that, what was it, $101 billion in fraud? Billion. But I didn't phrase it properly. And he really is so knowledgeable and so interesting in this area. So it was great to hear his optimism more broadly.
Well, I think we should probably wrap the show, Christina.
Yeah.
That's been a good one. And again, thanks, folk, for listening. We appreciate the feedback that we get. We've had some lovely feedback from some very good friends of the show, so appreciate that, everybody. It helps keep us motivated and getting up in the morning and, all the rest, which is important, right, at the end of the day. And we enjoy doing this, and we're glad that you enjoy listening. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so join us next week. And in the meantime, sign up for our newsletter, Signal, Not Noise, on our website, richmondadvisorygroup.com. And next week, who do we have as our guest?
So next week on the show, we have Mike Perez, who's a director at Echo. They're a service provider, managed service and managed security service provider, and we'll be chatting about a bunch of different things, including DLP, forensics and incident response, risk management, and so on. So it should be very interesting.
Nice. So how do folks get in touch then in the meantime if they want, other than subscribing to the newsletter, as I mentioned?
Yes. So you can always send us an email. I know it's a bit boomer, but still, email works for us.
It's so old. It's OG.
Yes. And you can reach Christina at richmondadvisorygroup.com.
Yeah, and you can reach Rory at richmondadvisorygroup.com, and we hope you will. Please do reach out.
Yeah, we look forward to that. Thanks all for listening, and hope you can join us again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.